because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not be drunk with wine in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Second scripture reads, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. This period that we are in this week, even though we don't have a formal Thanksgiving in the Bahamas, we have kind of adopted the U.S. tradition and designated this period as the period of Thanksgiving. And I was reflecting this week about Thanksgiving, and I was reminded of a period when I had just come home from college and I had the opportunity to travel in a few countries in the Caribbean. And I remember before I left, I was among a group of people who were complaining about the Bahamas. And after my trek through the Caribbean, I told one of my colleagues, I said, you know, when I get back to the Bahamas, I'm going to kiss the ground. Because sometimes we have to appreciate and be thankful for what we have. You know, when I saw, I didn't realize how different conditions were in some parts of the Caribbean, and so it gave me an extra appreciation for the Bahamas. Last week, a friend of mine, he was telling me about a conversation that he had with a visitor from the U.S. This visitor flew down on a private jet and was in the Bahamas for 3 days. And so he asked the visitor, he said, well, why did you come now during this pandemic? And how much did it cost you? He said, well, it cost me $25,000 just to get here. And I thought about it and I said, you know, this is the value that people place on a country that sometimes we take for granted. We take our beaches for granted. We take all of these things for granted. And sometimes we have to recognize what we have. A friend of mine sent me a note, said, this is not the year to get what you want. This is the year to appreciate what you have. And I think that in spite of what's going on in our country, we have a lot to be thankful for. And I think we have to make sure that we don't get distracted by what went wrong to the point where we don't see what we have that's right. So today I encourage everyone to remember to be thankful, grateful, and hopeful every day. Amen. Let's pray.
Yeah.
Father God, we just thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you that our Bahamas, in spite of what we have suffered and what we have gone through, that we still live in a beautiful land. We still have opportunities that others don't have. And we still have a lot to be thankful for. So today we give thanks, not only for what we have, but in anticipation of what is to come as we rebound and come back from this pandemic. We ask that you bless each member of this house. Father, encourage them by your Spirit and give them wisdom to deliberate effectively. In Jesus' name. Amen. Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Well, now, Dr. Hubert Bennett, Peter Sarkwa, Ransom and Jasmine Bannister, Edward Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Bell, Marvin Day, Frankie Sanders, Dionisio Diaguilas, Michael Pinzan, Darren Henfield, Ramon Ferreira, Lenita Rose, Brenda Rose, Alfred Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Kitchen Parker Edson, Aaron Lewis, Carlton Bowler, James Baldry, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Sanders, Frederick Maffel Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Coates, Miriam Wesley Emmanuel, Reese Tippman, Ruben Rami, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Don Cartwright, Sean L. Ferguson, Granite Hannah Martin, Tyson Ford, Jeff Dickinson.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, we begin this day on a very sad note. We begin this day on a sad note of the passing of the 51st Speaker of this Honorable House of Assembly, James Oswald Ingram. Honorable members, it was only just last week when we spoke of former member for Central and South Eleuthera with respect to the release of his book, A Brief Biography of the Honorable James Oswald Ingram by Diane Barcoots. And within that short period of time, we received word of his passing. He served in this honorable house as the 51st Speaker for the period 2002 to 2007 as the member for Central and South Eleuthera. Interestingly, this was his third attempt at being elected as a member of Parliament. So he had a record of persistency towards his goals and objectives. He was also a renowned businessman in the island of Eleuthera and was able to gain re-election in 2007, thereby serving 10 years in this Parliament. Honorable members, on behalf of all members who I would invite at a later stage in the proceedings to bring condolences, we extend deepest sympathies to the Honorable James Oswald Ingram's family on his passing. And in our tradition, I now call on all members to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, also at this time, I called on the honorable member for Southern Shores. You would note that many of us are attired in orange, wearing something orange today. And that is symbolic of the initiative of the 16 days of activism to end violence against women and girls. I now call on the honorable member for Southern Shores, whose portfolio covers this event, to bring remarks. and to give details on the significance of this initiative. The
Thank
chair
you very much.
recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Morning, House. I want to thank you, first of all, Mr. Speaker, for having acceded to my request for members to wear something orange in the House, departing from our normal dress code. I want to also apologize for some members who are not wearing the orange because there was a mix-up in the messaging after we got word of the passing of the former speaker, to whose family I extend my condolences, that we ought to wear something black in mourning. So I believe that caused the mixed message. But I want to begin by expressing gratitude to every member in here, because I know every member in here support the whole philosophy of ending gender-based violence, ending violence against women and girls. The 16 days of activism, Mr. Speaker, which is being championed by the Zonta clubs of Nassau and New Providence throughout the Bahamas, is an annual international event. It is an event geared towards sensitizing and bringing awareness to the need to end gender-based violence. I want to commend Zonta, and I think that deserves a beat on the table. For they have been relentless in their pursuit to ensure that the message reaches every nook and cranny. And while the 16 days of activism is between today, which is the 25th of November, and the 10th of December, which isn't by accident Human Rights Day, Zonta continues to advocate throughout the course of the year. And Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I didn't mention and single out also the Crisis Center, Dr. Sandra Dean Patterson, and the work that she and her team would have been doing throughout the years to give support, to give counseling and sensitization to this whole subject of ending gender-based violence. Orange the world. And so the color orange is the color for the 16 days of activism. I want to thank persons who would have already purchased t-shirts, because every Friday within that period is T-shirt day. For persons who are thinking about it and haven't gotten their t-shirts as yet, they could contact Patrice Stewart Brown at 376-6080. The t-shirts are $15 and the mask, beautiful mask, Zonta says no, are $10. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the fabric stores that have given discounts for orange ribbons. I also want to thank the Minister of National Security, the Commissioner of Police, and all the police officers for their contribution throughout the course of the year to this campaign. I'm aware that the minister is making significant effort to ensure that there is greater sensitivity on the part of officers when addressing matters relative to violence on the whole, gender-based violence in particular. I want to thank the Minister of Health. You know, Mr. Speaker, these matters usually end up with injury. And the Minister of Health and his team are the ones who have to try to physically put these victims back together and to help with the offering of counseling, etc. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is not a matter that is separate and apart in the Ministry of Social Services. This is a matter for all of us who are leaders. This is a matter for all of us who are nation builders. This is a matter for all of us who are concerned about our nation and the people therein. And so I ask everyone to join in with the activities, participate, and ensure that to the extent we can, there is no gender-based violence in the Bahamas against women and girls. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, also at this time, I wish to table a report from the Auditor General. It's an audit report, audit examination on the accounts of the training agency for the period July 2016 to December 2019. Audit of the document do lie on the table. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg leave to table the House a copy of the following. Copy of the proclamation of emergency orders first. Whereas Article 29(1)B of the Constitution recognizes that the Governor General may make a proclamation that a state of public emergency exists, and therefore I, Most Honorable Cornelius Alvin Smith, Governor General Commonwealth of Bahamas, in exercise of powers conferred upon me by Article 29(b) of the Constitution of Commonwealth of Bahamas, hereby declare that A, with effect from 24th of November, a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas. B, this proclamation of emergency shall continue for a period of 14 days unless extended by each House of Parliament by resolution, continuing its force for a further period as provided in Article 29(5) of the Constitution.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table the copy of the following. Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Number 13, Order 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provision Order 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order Ordered that the document do lie on the table. Further, laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2020, Bahamas Registered Stock number 13, 2023, 2025, 2027, 2030, 2040, and 2050.
Ordered that the document be brought up. Ordered that the document do lie on the table. Further, laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Direction 2020, Bahamas Registered Stock 2050.
Ordered that the document be brought up. Ordered that the document do lie on the table. Further, laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 3, Regulations 2020.
Ordered that the document be brought up. Ordered that the document do lie on the table. Further, laying of documents. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the final report of the Advisory Committee on the introduction of local government to the province, 2019.
Ordered that the document be brought up. Ordered that the document do lie on the table. Further, laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further laying of documents.
Thank you, honorable member. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a brief communication on Disability Awareness Week. But Mr. Speaker, if you would indulge me, before doing that, I would like to extend condolences to two members of the social services team who are grieving as a result of loss of family members and loved ones. And that would be Betty Williams and Ellery Seymour. Mr. Speaker, I single them out, or I want to recognize them, because I want to say to this House that even in their moments of grief and sorrow, these persons continue to answer to the call of the needs of our society. So they deal with their individual personal challenges and they still rise to the occasion. And I am just pleased, Mr. Speaker, to be a member of a team such as that. Mr. Speaker, I also want to give condolences to the family of Lemfiel Leonardo Maycock of West Avenue, Millers Heights, who passed recently. May his soul and the souls of the faithfully departed rest in peace. And to the good people of Southern Shores, I want to say, as we prepare for this festive season, COVID notwithstanding, we're gonna be doing cleanup in the various neighborhoods in preparation for the holidays. And I want to say that Mrs. Colby of Ivy Terrace off Flamingo Drive is preparing some scrumptious Christmas cakes. See her and put in your orders. Ms. Colby, the House of Assembly is asking for samples. Mr. Speaker, when I assumed the portfolio as minister, I made it clear that there are three groups of persons that stand out and I have a special place for in my heart. And those are older, more experienced persons. Those are children, and those are persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the week 29th November to 3rd December has been set aside to celebrate activities for persons with disabilities under the theme Building Back Better toward a disability inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. The Disabilities Affairs Division has planned a number of events, which include church service, radio, talk show appearances. There is one that stands out and I want to invite persons to participate in, and that is a virtual town hall meeting that will be held on the 3rd of December. It stands out, Mr. Speaker, because the guest speaker will be Mr. Senator Floyd Morrison from CARICOM. He will be the guest speaker, Mr. Speaker. He is the first blind president of the Senate of Jamaica. And so he will be speaking from a point of personal experience. He will be speaking from sincere advocacy, and I'm satisfied that he will have a wealth of knowledge and inspiration, not just for persons with disabilities, but for the entire community. Because when we speak of persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, we have to realize that there is that extended effect. You got to think about caretakers. You got to think about the financial impact, the financial implication. Because the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, not everyone who is disabled at this time was actually born that way. As a result of traffic accidents, we focus on, Mr. Speaker, the number of fatalities, but the number of persons who survive those accidents is so much greater. And a number of those persons end up with permanent or temporary disabilities. A number of those persons would have been breadwinners for their families, Mr. Speaker. And so imagine the effect of not being able to provide for the family and then racking up some serious medical expenses that there is difficulty paying for. I say, Mr. Speaker, that the community of persons with disabilities have inspired me while I serve in this capacity. Because I see them from day to day, Mr. Speaker, even with their challenges, rising to the occasion and not focusing on their disability, but focusing on their ability. Mr. Speaker, it warmed my heart earlier in the year to attend a graduation at the Center for the Deaf, along with the Minister of Education, to see 5 beautiful young persons, 3 girls and 2 boys, graduate from the Center for the Deaf after having already completed a number of courses at the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute, where they would have gone on to further their education. And so, Mr. Speaker, it's not just about disability, it's about abilities. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize and thank the various corporate citizens, various civic groups, non-governmental organizations that participate in and contribute to persons with disabilities. Special thanks, Mr. Speaker, to the Red Cross and for their contribution to the Center for the Deaf. I want to say a special thanks also to Rotary, Mrs. Aubrey Sedeward Knowles in his, posthumously, Mr. Speaker, for their contribution to the Bahamas Association for the Physically Disabled. Miss Linda Smith and her team there does an excellent job with those children and ensures that they have as much access to education as their circumstances would allow. I want to especially commend parents who have gotten beyond the point of keeping their children with disabilities locked away, because they do the children an inhumane disservice, because those children have the ability to learn. Those children have the ability to develop their abilities. And so I commend them. Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize and commend Reverend Lester Ferguson, who's the chairperson for the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and that excellent work that he and his commission is doing. The Secretariat, which is led by Ms. Desiree Clark, they are doing an excellent work. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not just speaking on their behalf, I'm also a messenger and errand boy for them this morning. They asked me to give you, Mr. Speaker, this shirt. Now, Mr. Kenred Rule, he is the president of the Alliance for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So he sent like a 3X, because he didn't get a chance to touch you, Mr. Speaker, to see that you are a 2X, but he was told that you were a big guy. So he sent a 3X. And so this to you, Mr. Speaker, from Mr. Kenred Rule, Mr. Reverend Lester Ferguson, Ms. Clark, and all the persons from the community of persons with disabilities as they celebrate 2020 under the theme Unity and Strength. Mr. Speaker, ever since I started, can someone give this to the Speaker, please? We're not tabling this is for the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ever since I started sharing that I do a morning devotion, persons have been sending various scriptures and small quotes to me every morning. And this morning, someone sent me something that says, it costs $0.00 to treat someone with respect. Thank you, Dominic. Somebody else sent me something this morning from Proverbs 14, verse 31. And this, I think, is from the New International Version, but it reads, "He who oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but he who is kind to the needy honors God." I want to say to this House and this nation, it costs 0.00 cents to treat persons with respect. And I want to remind you that he who is kind to the needy honors God. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. I want to thank the organizers of the Disability Awareness Week for their kind consideration in donating this T-shirt to me, celebrating unity and strength. I promise to wear it out. Order that the communication to lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Blue Down.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further statements or communications by ministers.
Thank you, honorable member. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On last sitting of the House, I gave notice. I would like to at this time to renew our notice of first reading of the bill to repeal the Ocean Industry Act 1971 for first reading at the next meeting of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the good people of Yamacraw to start off the debate on a bill for an act to amend the penal code to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government. Mr. Speaker, before I begin, I will lay out the plan to address the amendment to this bill. And deal with the sections to the bill that I intend to address today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but I crave your indulgence just to address issues that were raised in an interview that was given on yesterday. Speaker, while going to the cabinet, I gave a brief interview looking at the immigration department. Some of the things that we were doing, I highlighted one of the most, I think, important aspects of the reforms that we have in place to address the concerns of not just local, but local clientele and international clientele, and that is the mystery shopper program, Mr. Speaker, that is being done by an independent group, and I made sure that nobody from the department sits on that group. And when the persons responsible for executing the mystery shopper program asked me who would I volunteer, I said, no, you're responsible to assess even the Minister of Immigration. And so rank and file understand. They told me that they were at the gates of immigration, to check in the phone. We have persons from the immigrant community. We enlisted the Bahamas Financial Services Board and asked them to provide us with persons. So there may be international persons that are part of this group traveling to the Bahamas to ensure that we get a comprehensive analysis of the quality of service that we're rendering and then how we treat and deal with that. Significant to that, because some of the complaints that we have been receiving over the years, which I was speaking to the deputy director, of persons who are married but don't know that they are married. So some people are freely volunteering information to us now because there's that anonymity in terms of how they can present the information to us. And so I want to commend that independent group that represents a cross-section of the community and the international community to address. And I was speaking to the deputy director. She said someone called her the other day and said something. She said she didn't know whether or not it was a secret shopper that was testing her. And so I want to commend them along with the immigration director. But the issue was raised, Mr. Speaker, about citizenship by investment. And I had reason to speak to Angliston this morning, a lady that I admire and respect. and indicated to her what exactly was my commentary on the whole concept of citizenship by investment. And when I spoke to it, I spoke to the comparative analysis that was done and the misfortunes of some other jurisdictions, indicated that no decisions had been made. And at that time, I was unable to directly speak to the issue. But I did indicate that based on past activities, because this is not of recent vintage, that there were persons who are here in the Bahamas and abroad who are very much interested in the whole concept of citizenship. In the concept of citizenship by investment. So when somebody from Bimini sent me something this morning, indicating that it was a fait accompli, I want to thank Jason Springer. He always sending me stuff. He sent that quickly to me, so I thought it necessary to clarify exactly what I had said. You know, I was trained in the law by Anguston's big brother, and he always told me, you know exactly what to say, so that the interpretation from what you say, there cannot be a varied interpretation. So I think I was very explicit. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not send condolences, Mr. Speaker, to a lady that is near and dear to me and who is responsible for assisting a lot of the young men and women in the quaint community of New Bight, Cat Island, and that is Miss Cosette Johnson. And unfortunately, a child. There's nothing, my mother experienced it. I don't know the pain and agony, but I saw it, of a mother having to funeralize a child. And Chroma Johnson, the late Chroma Johnson, passed away on last week, leaving his beloved mother, a teacher, a matriarch in the Cat Island community, and his sister, Shani, and all of your students, including myself, Ezra Russell, Sherman Russell, the late Mr. Perry Monroe, and Kent, and my cousin Kent Monroe, who might have given you some headache. We are praying for you and asking God to strengthen you, and we love you. And that includes the community of Dowds, Cat Island. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not say something about the proclamation that was just read by Kalani. I've had a lot of time to reflect on where I find myself at this stage of my development, having now to deconstruct my law office and take my stuff home to my house, create a virtual office, saying that I'm inactive because I'm serving. But Mr. Speaker, I think God has granted me a golden opportunity to serve with a remarkable gentleman. And I've been able to sit and watch when people hurl insults, change their words, when, as some would say, there's Satan in the camp, and a number of other things. And I was reading what my bishop, the great, but he wouldn't like me to say great, but Bishop Leish Boyd had to say when he spoke about political maturity in the country and how we deal with each other. And I think both parties, Speaker, can learn a lot about what Bishop Leish Boyd had to say. But one of the things he said, Mr. Speaker, and I saw it, I read it yesterday, it says, you know, every government makes missteps. But in the context, Mr. Speaker, of health crisis, unlike any other country in the world, as the Prime Minister for Barbados puts it correctly. He says, you know, we have not contributed to the climate crisis, but we are the benefactors of all of the atrocities, whether it be the rise in sea levels or Hurricane Dorian. And unlike any other country, nobody has refuted this as yet. And I've said it a few times in space and even publicly, that compared to what the damage that was done to Abaco and Freeport is almost equivalent to about 5 states when you look at the comparative analysis and the number of people and how significant it is, those two locales is to our economy being devastated. And so facing that and an economic crisis, I put all those things together. He says, you know, the government has done well. No beds. I've sat and watched the Minister of Education having to move quickly from brick and mortar. Pardon me? Pardon me? No beds. No beds. I said I had to watch the Minister of Education move quickly from brick and mortar to a digitized form of education where everybody, and I want to commend all on Sunday, has been fixed in it. I saw the guys from the numbers industry, members of the opposition, Anglican, saying, I need my shares of devices. Yeah. Rotary, the church, everybody pitching in to see how best we can assist our children. The healthcare. I watched as Dr. Sands played his role. Now a new minister is here. And I saw the commitment to it. Sometimes I listen. My cousin was having a stressful weekend and I was riding with him and he said to me, everything is now a minute. With the greatest respect, Alan. Say, man, if you run out of gas, you say, minutes could work. He's from Guyana, he was just trying to straighten me. He said, anything that happened, just blame it on minutes. It's good to do it. But he said that to cheer me up. He said that to say, looking around the world where countries are locking down straight into the new year, everybody's clamoring for the vaccine. I want to say to you, Kalani, and I know I said in the past, and I told you something the other day that only you and I know in terms of where I would be after 2022. That I'm not going to talk that. That it is a delight and a pleasure to be on these rigorous seas, violent seas, where you don't sleep. I remember Mr. Han used to tell me about Anglican's father back in the day. Some of us don't get sleep because you're thinking you're constantly adjusting in the context of where the opposition sometimes I say, what the hell are they going to say now? Or where they're exercising their fundamental constitutional rights as a Majesty's loyal opposition. And Kelly Allen sometimes don't come to meetings. And then go on the television and say he don't think it would be serious. And then his deputy comes to the meeting and all the experts are there to say, this is where we are. So I want to say to him publicly, despite what anybody had to say, my family and I founded a life to serve in this country at this time. Mr. Speaker, on last week, I had the opportunity to go in, and I told this house to go into Yamacraw after a series of shooting and the latest shooting. And one of the most gripping explanations of it is when I went to the lady's house, whose son was shot through the window. And she told me, Mr. Johnson, I relived the experience when I heard the explosion. I did not know what to say to her, but she strengthened me. And I simply said to her to say, when I drove through the community, I saw people in their yards towering, afraid to come on the street. Pardon me? Yes, I know. But I was able to, I said that I would go then, do an interview, to say to those, and not many people, those cowards, that if I found out who got any information, that I was prepared to tell my friend, and no less a person than the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Paul Road. I have a very good friend, Mr. Solomon Cash. I would tell them what I know about what was happening. And I did an interview. And Mr. Speaker, I said, not only would I tell them what I know, but I'm going to bring the entire country's attention to the young man who was shot on the bucket. That was the second time he got shot. The lady's son who was shot through the window in a very small community, and I suspect that people, they know each other. My friend Beetle, who left 2 children, he got shot, left 2 children. Then there was the shooting of an ex-gentleman who lives with his brother, who was a sergeant of police. He doesn't come back into the community. And then there was the shooting, and all these didn't happen at once, Mr. Speaker, with a very short space of time, the recent shooting. I started bringing attention to everybody, so I started to call all the reverends, Mr. Speaker. I called a noted reverend, Pastor Morrison, very vigorous, committed, who prayed. I said, we have to bring attention to this. And so, Mr. Speaker, on this Friday, we agreed that we would have a town meeting. You know, when things got hot, there was an old man who would say to me, I've never done it before. But he says, Alfred, sometimes you got to throw the slop bucket in the road. When you hear old people say that, that means it's serious time. Women, children, men, women, boys, and girls, we would all agree. In such a small society, should not have to live like that. And I want to commend the Minister of National Security and the police force for the tremendous job that they have done. Because the figures aren't what they used to be. But one death in those circumstances is too much, Mr. Speaker. So we have planned for this Friday, Mr. Speaker, a town hall meeting. Dubbed Yamakwa United. We are one. Enough is enough. We have an excellent group of persons that will be carried live by Facebook and on WebEx because we understand the protocol. So I would like to commend the Commissioner for sending my good friend, Mr. Solomon Cash, and who everybody knows very well. He's a no-nonsense man to assist us, and he will be presenting. Dr. David Allen has agreed. He says just let him know the date and time. He's going to come. Mr. Dwight Ferguson, a local pastor in the community, has agreed, and his church is right up the street from where these incidents happen, and I want to commend him and other persons. When incidents happen, they are brave enough to go to the yard, give the counseling, and engage. And he's my local hero. I want to thank Mr. Kendall Lewis. Mr. Kendall Lewis ran against me in the last election. He was an independent candidate. His father was a former police officer, and we became such good friends that we shared food on that day and drink. And we talk about politics, life, and all that. He's agreed as a youth activist to sit. And obviously, we got a young lady, a brilliant, articulate, and eloquent young lady to bring the ladies due to this, Ms. Brianne Hepburn, and she will sit. And then we went and we found the father, one of the stalwarts in the community, Mr. Arnold Joseph. And he says, he will come, he will support, and his daughter will come, and she will moderate to assist as we carry this live. And Speaker, we intend to have this town meeting not in the church, not away from the community, but right in the road where some of these shootings occurred. And almost next to the house where the last shooting occurred. And a lady, I was sitting in my office on, I think it was the day before yesterday. One of my friends was there to see me, and when I came out, he came without an appointment. He was very upset that I took some time to come out, not to talk to him. He said, the lady was here to you who seemed somewhat distressed, and she was waiting. Why didn't you come out to acknowledge her? And I said, I sent a message out. I said, but I tell him I'll go and get her. I went and I got that lady. And when I got that lady was one of the women whose child lost their life in one of the senseless killings. And she indicated, she says, listen, I'm so happy that the community is doing something. And on that night, if permitted, I would like to come and sit as evidence of her disdain for what has happened in the community. So, Mr. Speaker, that is what we intend to do in the constituency of Yamakwa. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the bill at hand, and I thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. And that is the the proposed amendment to the penal code, which is located under part 23 of the penal code under the heading robbery, fraud, and extortion. And Mr. Speaker, the provision deals properly with the intent to defraud a foreign government. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, there was an amendment to the penal code that dealt with the intent to defraud the government of the Bahamas. Some similar provisions, Mr. Speaker. But to date, 18 was assented to in 2018. You're quite right, sir. It was assented to in 2018. And Caribbean does. Okay. It was assented to, Mr. Speaker, in December of it was assented to, Mr. Speaker, in 2018. And that provision, Mr. Speaker, dealt with the intent to defraud the government. Mr. Speaker, there's no misgiving that we have signed on to a number of agreements which are designed to prevent tax evasion, tax avoidance, or evasion. And so this amendment, Mr. Speaker, adds a new section 35B to the penal code, which creates the offense of intent to defraud a foreign government. And Mr. Speaker, the intent of this is so that someone, whether based in the Bahamas or not, cannot use their locality in the Bahamas to defraud a government. And it's very short. There's been a comparative analysis that's been done. There's been consultation on the amendment before the House today. And I think there's agreement. I can't speak for the other side, the side opposite, in terms of the intent for us to do what we're doing today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we can recall in 2018 an early amendment was passed. The early amendment was passed to the existing section 357A. This created the offense of tax evasion in the Bahamas. However, the intent of that amendment was only to create an offense which permitted international legal cooperation on the basis of dual criminality. That amendment created a framework for agency-to-agency judicial cooperation in the investigation of foreign tax evasion cases on the basis that tax evasion was also a crime in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, however, because of the First Amendment was simply to commit a tax evasion offense in the Bahamas. It only related to tax evasion offenses against Bahamian tax law and not a foreign tax law. Hence, Mr. Speaker, these provisions that we're here to debate today. 357B, intent to defraud a foreign government. And it reads as follows, Mr. Speaker. Any person who, with intent to defraud the government of a foreign jurisdiction, directly or indirectly, by any action or omission in the Bahamas, willfully makes, delivers, or cause false or fraudulent information to be made to a person employed in the service of the government of the foreign jurisdiction. Service of the government of that foreign jurisdiction. See, Mr. Speaker, of looking at tax avoidance, it falls to be a part of the entire machinery that we have created by way of the Financial Transaction Reporting Act or the Proceeds of Crime Act, both acts which identify what we call identified risk issues. And so it brings a tighter, a greater attention to the entire international regulatory regime when you have this being put in place. So when you look at issues like money laundering, well, I said tax avoidance, tax evasion, trafficking in persons, the funding of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, or terrorism financing, or what we are experiencing today, cybercrime. It is all to fit into the grand scheme of things to prevent those type of activities from existing or occurring. Mr. Speaker, the provision also makes provisions for sanctions. It says in section 357B at section 1, Roman numeral 1, says on summary conviction, if a person commits an offense, if they commit the offense, they are liable on summary conviction to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months or a fine not exceeding $100,000 or to both fine and imprisonment. And then it goes and it explains in the section that follows that on conviction or an indictment to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years or to a fine not exceeding $500,000. And then section 2, Mr. Speaker, goes on to speak about what the court shall order. It says the court shall order in terms of forfeiture of the assets. And so the assets to be derived from that are derived from the activities, Mr. Speaker, can be taken and put into the national fund. And it says, among the penalties for the offense is the power for the instrumentalities or proceeds of such an offense to be forfeited and paid to the confiscated fund. These monies which are forfeited will not be paid or shared with any government to settle any tax liabilities in that country. These forfeited sums will be used exclusively to benefit the confiscated assets fund and can be used to support the grieving families of slain law enforcement officers and defense force officers killed or maimed in the line of duty, or to fund the purchase of necessary supplies and equipment for our defense and law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, because the likely accused person will invariably be resident in foreign countries where tax crime is charged under this section, a persuasive burden of proof is placed on the accused person, Mr. Speaker, to produce such factual evidence that he has paid all due taxes in his home jurisdiction. This is because it would otherwise be extremely difficult to obtain evidence from an accused person who is abroad or who is from a country which does not have an extradition treaty with the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, subsection 2 also allows for the non-conviction-based civil forfeiture of instrumentalities or the proceeds of defrauding of the foreign government. Again, Mr. Speaker, this is based upon the fact that in most cases, the accused person will usually reside in a foreign jurisdiction. The Proceeds of Crime Act, which was recently passed, also allows for civil forfeiture, civil forfeiture, non-conviction-based forfeiture of the proceeds of all identified risk offenses. And Speaker earlier identified the identified risk offenses. For Mr. Speaker, some Bahamian financial services corporate service providers have inquired as to whether or not they can face liability if their clients engage in tax fraud against their own government. The answer to that, in short, Mr. Speaker, is no. the financial and corporate service provider would have to actively conspire with the client and to have knowingly or, to quote the amendment, willfully assisted the client in evading and defrauding its domestic tax authority in order to face any potential liability. Mr. Speaker, the Financial Action Task Force Immediate Outcome 7.3 now mandates that all countries throughout the world investigate and prosecute foreign tax offenses. This is the way in which the world has gone over the past several years as a result of the pressure of the OECD through the European Union and now through the Financial Action Task Force. So, Mr. Speaker, today I've laid out the legislation. The burden of proof is placed squarely. There's a presumption placed squarely on the shoulders of the person who is alleged to have defrauded a foreign government to prove that they have not done so. It's a very short piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. So, in all the circumstances, I support this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to speak again to some of the things that we're doing in Yamacraw before I said. On this weekend, as I said earlier, I spoke to the transformation in the Ministry of Education. On last week, I said that we had gotten, I think, more than $300,000 worth of devices. We did a community-wide assessment where we set up a brilliant young lady, set up an app, and persons were able to send in their name. I want to say to persons, we don't have devices for everybody. And as I said before, I don't mind anybody in here. We get them by donation. And I want to thank those persons who have donated those devices, as we've been doing in the past. Frontline workers, frontline workers and single mothers, essential workers that is, will be taken care of firstly. And so we've gone through it. We also have a girls club in Yamacraw, and we're seeking to assist every member of the girls club by providing them with a device. And so we've communicated with the Minister of Education, who has told us just to keep a record, and we're trying to cross-reference. And if you know that you have gotten a device, please don't cause us to not give a device to someone who needs it. So on this coming Saturday, my team, we're working very hard so that we can affect that. And if you haven't gotten in this first round, we're working as best we can to get more. The other thing that we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is that we're having a flu shot that will be administered. And we're going to do that at what I claim to be one of the country's largest backyard farming initiatives in Nassau. And we're not just talking it, we're doing it. We've gotten a number of farming kits from the Ministry of Agriculture. And so when we're giving the food shots, you can feel free to pick up a farming kit. And our bananas have grown so good that we're now able to get young plants from the mature trees. They call them suckers. And so we're able to, what we're doing is, banana suckers that is. We're now transplanting them. You have to be so careful. We're now transplanting those. That's why I said banana plants. I let someone tell me say the next word. But we're now transplanting those plants. So we have peppers and any number of things. And I always see my good friend and constituent, he congratulates me on it. And I'm not saying it to get a brownie point, but he really encourages in terms of objectively. Yeah, the senior man, in terms of how we do it. Mr. Speaker, we have been deliberate in Yamacraw. Whenever I speak to naturalization, I'd always speak about commitment, loyalty, and patriotism. So every park you go on, you see the flag painted. And so for those parks that we haven't named yet, we've painted the Bahamian colors. And you would see the 10 by 4 Bahamian flag there. So you have no misgivings as to where you are. And children understand where they are. And any function we do, the national anthem and the pledge. And when we're doing swearing-in functions, I tell them, if I see you don't mean it, we have no problems with that. We take you up the line to ensure that we only get some. So we've been doing that. Our band, we're starting our virtual. We have more than $50,000. And this is by contribution of band equipment. This is not fictitious. Fictitious. We have it. And so we're now starting this. We have a brilliant teacher who says, listen, we have to start our class virtually and get the doctors in to tell us how we can properly social distance to start. So virtually we'll be starting our band classes and a number of other events that we've been doing. We've started in Yamacraw, the free removal, and oh God, we've been getting a lot. We've been in Yamacraw and the derelict vehicle removal. I want to thank the gentleman who was assisting us with removing those vehicles. Some of the vehicles are nice, and some of the guys are saying, listen, I can get a good vehicle because people purchase and just want to get rid of one. So we've started all of that. We're assisting the senior citizens and any number of events we've done. And we're preparing our report card showing that, Mr. Speaker, we were not afraid to engage. Because we're having town meetings. We've had town meetings throughout. Constituency association meetings, visiting with the elders. So that at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be able to give a proper account for my stewardship, Mr. Speaker. So I support, Yamacraw supports this bill. It supports Kalani, and it's most important in the difficult times in which we find ourselves, Mr. Speaker. Three crises, an economic crisis, a health crisis, a climate crisis, Mr. Speaker. But we don't have a crisis in courage when I look at our frontline workers. I'm proud to be a Bahamian and support the first reading of this amendment that's before this Honorable House. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder for the second reading? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Carmichael. Take it.
Speaker, I rise to second this amendment and to follow the outstanding job that the member for Yamacraw did, the outstanding lead that he provided this morning. I do so, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to wear my orange, symbolize a bright and optimistic future that's free from violence against women and girls. Show my support for that future. Speaker, I need to start by thanking the people of Carmichael. You know, I was diagnosed with COVID-19. And I was shocked to be diagnosed. I had no symptoms, completely asymptomatic. When I was called and they told me that I tested positive, I almost said diagnosed it again. You all know where that comes from, right? Mr. Speaker, I stayed home in isolation in accordance with the medical advice, 14 days. In that 14-day period, I had no symptoms at all, none. I was blessed. I was very fortunate. I know that so many other people are not so fortunate. We've lost lives. We have lost brothers, sisters, friends. This terrible, terrible, terrible virus. And so I cannot rise here today without cautioning Bahamians. Let's be safe in this holiday season coming up. let's stay safe. Let's keep COVID at a distance. You know, as a people, we love to hug, Mr. Speaker. And when I was in school in the Caribbean, they used to say, I don't know what's wrong with y'all Bahamians. Y'all like to do this. You know, we just love to touch and hug. Unfortunately, this is a time when we can't do it. We could still say words of endearment, but we need to all be aware of how dangerous this virus is. And we need to protect our family and our loved ones. Let's be responsible in our conduct, and let's continue to keep the virus at a distance. Speaker, please permit me as I stand to offer condolences to one of my constituents and a good friend. We lost Patrick Clark in Carmichael, and I offer condolences to his wife, Mary Ann Hicks Clark. All of you know was our real Bahamian athletic hero, icon. I also lost a good friend in Montgomery, and forgive me, my friend, Antoinette Thompson. I offer condolence to Giovanna, better known as Ping, to Ron, and to Frankie. And I join my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, in offering condolences to the family of your predecessor, who was a member of this parliament for 2 terms, I believe. Not your immediate predecessor. Mr. Speaker, the world has changed. Money moves around the world with a click. Poof. Billions of dollars can move in seconds, just like that. Just like that. And the Bahamas is a financial hub. The world, one of the financial hubs in the world. We have a reputation to maintain. And to maintain that reputation, we must ensure that we are respected for the integrity of the business climate and for the manner in which we respect the laws of other countries. You know, when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about all the scams that we've seen in recent times. The lottery scams. You know, they have these scams where people call you up and say you won a lottery, you pay the fees and taxes up front, and we're going to send you the money. Right next door in Jamaica, they have what they call the Jamaican phone scammers, where they've had a lot of that in Jamaica. And that's been blamed for financing gang warfare in Jamaica and for murders. Speaker, the scams have even gotten into popular culture. You know, strictly speaking, I'm a Percy Sledge man. But the young people listen to people like Vibes Cartel and whatnot. Vibes Cartel has a song called Reputation, which glorifies scamming. You believe it. When you listen to the lyrics, it says, them call it scam. Me call it reparation. And it says, big up every scammer. We make US dollar. Fill up the house for your mama. Western Union people figure me more honor. It's a very catchy tune. A lot of our people, young people, listen to it. And they don't realize that they're talking about scamming. They're talking about things out there that are illegal, dishonest. And you could easily catch yourself singing the lyrics. So what I'm saying is that even in our environment today, we create an environment that we sing about dishonesty and don't even think about it. And then we see the prevalence on the internet, where you have to be so careful with your online banking, because otherwise your bank account might be empty. For many members of this parliament, Mr. Speaker, we've seen it. Even I'm not on Facebook and I'm not on Instagram. But I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said they just talked to me on Facebook and they sent me the money I asked for. But I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. But they're scammers. One of the things we're here today to do is to send a message to let it be said that the Bahamas is not in the business of facilitating or encouraging dishonesty and scamming. That's what this amendment is really about. This piece of legislation, sir, goes a long way to protect the international reputation of our country. It tells the world that we will not tolerate or harbor or provide a refuge for criminals who may sit in the Bahamas and scam or try to defraud a foreign government. It also tells the world that this little Bahamas will live up to our international responsibilities to other sovereign states, just as we expect them to live up to their responsibilities to us. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, this government is continuing to build on the law and order foundation that we've established. The member for Yamakoa, Mr. Speaker, mentioned the 2018 amendments, which made it an offense, he indicated, to make, deliver, or cause false or fraudulent information to be made to a public, essentially to a public servant in the Bahamas, relating to the collection of money for the general revenue of this country, where the intent is to defraud the government. It also made it an offense to omit to give information to a public servant relating to the collection of money for the general revenue, where one is required to do so by law, and the intention is to defraud the government. It also made it an offense to obstruct, hinder, or intimidate, or resist a public or official servant in the collection of money for general revenue of the Bahamas. Let me give you an example, Mr. Speaker. Let me put it in context for every one of us. What we try to do is create offenses. I'll give you an example. Bahamians often bring cars in from the United States and elsewhere. So you import a car, and you know you paid $30,000 for that car. And then you go to customs, and you make that false, provide him with that information, say, well, you know, boy, I went down on 27th Avenue, and I only paid $12,000 for that car. That law will catch you. In relation to that same car, if you change the VIN number and he's inspecting it, he's going to look at the VIN number and you push him away and you tell him, stay away from that. That law that we passed in 2018 will catch you. So what we're doing today, Mr. Speaker, in very simple terms, is first extending the law to make it an offense when anyone conducts himself in a similar manner towards an employee of a foreign government relating to the collection of money for the purpose of the general revenue of that foreign government. And we've seen it happen too often in the Bahamas. We've seen it happen. Yeah. We've seen, sorry? You were involved? I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry to say that, Cat Island. I'm sorry to say that. The Speaker, Mr. Speaker, when we sit in Parliament, on this side, we take it very seriously what we're saying. This is a very serious matter because we have had persons in this country seek to facilitate crime by making false statements to foreign governments at a very high level. Prominent persons in the banks, offshore, in other positions.
Just directly or indirectly.
Sorry?
Directly or indirectly.
To governance, yes.
Or indirectly.
Yes. And omitting to make those statements to governance, Speaker, for the purpose of the general revenue of those governments. So, Mr. Speaker, we are sending messages today that if you sit in the Bahamas and you submit that false statement to a public official in a foreign government, and on summary conviction, you could serve 6 months in prison or pay a fine of $100,000. And if you're convicted on information or indictment, as we like to say, you can serve 5 years in prison or pay a fine of $500,000. As the member for Yamoussoukro also mentioned, Mr. Speaker, the law provides forfeiture orders. And I want to remind everybody that where property is used in the commission or in connection with the offense, that property can be forfeited. Also, where property is received or possessed as a result of a product of an offense, that property can be forfeited whether or not anyone has been convicted in relation to that offense. So the court has, and I shouldn't say can, because the words in the act are mandatory. It says the court shall order to be forfeited to the Crown, the government of the Bahamas. It was mandatory forfeiture, whether or not someone is convicted. I want to also close, Mr. Speaker, by referring to certain presumptions that are in the amendment. And the amendment has what we call a shift of the onus of proof. And I don't want anyone to confuse that with the burden of proof. In the Bahamas, the burden of proof is always on the prosecution. But the onus of proof, what lawyers refer to as an evidential burden, is in this act. The evidential burden is very simple. If you're driving on the street and the police arrest you, driving, you can't produce your license. They won't arrest you, they'll charge you with driving without a valid driver's license. But when you go to court, all they have to do is prove that you drove on the road and you didn't have a driver's license on you at that time. The onus is on you, what we refer to as an evidential burden, to produce your driver's license to the court. This act creates an onus on the defendant, an evidential burden. So where the foreign country raises sufficient evidence that a fact exists, and the fact would be the allegation that the defendant owed money to that government and did not pay it, that is going to be presumed to be true unless the defendant provides evidence to the contrary. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, an allegation by a foreign government that information in relation to their general revenue which the foreign government law required the defendant to provide was not provided, is also going to have to be rebutted by evidence by the defendant. Speaker, very serious legislation. This is legislation that's going to make a difference in the country and show our colleagues, our allies, that we're very serious about enforcing the law. It's not anything to be taken lightly. I'm honored that I can follow the lead that Yamakwa provided. Mr. Speaker, I second the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the penal code. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, let me, before I start, lend my voice to the chorus of voices that extend condolences to my friend, colleague, former parliamentarian, former Speaker, George Lingo, who also served on many occasions as the acting Governor General, having held the post of Deputy Governor General. The community of South Ilusha and Ilusha in general will be sorely be missing a giant of a man, a kind, gentle soul who always pursued those things that made for people. And as a speaker in this house, he understood what it meant for the minority to have its say and the majority to have its say. And there's a major distinction. And the majority will always have its way. The majority will have the way. But we, in the minority, always be allowed to have our say. He understood that. He carried it out with teeth. And so, to his wife, Marie, and his family, I extend my condolences on behalf of my wife, Anne-Marie, and my family. Of course, the Progressive Party will be paying a fitting tribute at the appropriate time for him and his life and time. I also use opportunity that I meant to do last time to extend condolences to Priscilla and her family on the passing of her mother, Robert Councillor Hazel Edgecombe, one of the oldest Robert Councillors of the Progressive Party. I'm reminded of it because she is from San Salvador. And it's a great place. It's a great place. We note the presence of the Prime Minister in the district running the beaches. And hopefully one day he'll allow me to be able to move around with my entourage to run the beaches as well. Right? And so Mr. Speaker, I just extend my condolences to Hazel Edgecombe and the family and the community of the United States and San Salvador, because she was a community-minded person, always in the forefront of things that were progressive for that island. And I want to let the family know she'll be sorely missed, particularly during this period. Mr. Speaker, when I first saw the amendment to the penal code, I didn't know, first of all, that it was creating a new offense in the Bahamas. And the thing that came to my mind when I first read it was when we were dealing with a slew of of legislation that was seemingly required because of the threats that were continually hanging over our head and looming over our head of being blacklisted. And one particular piece of legislation that we passed, I don't remember the name now, but as I said, but it has to do with what I call the base erosion, shifting of profit debts. When you're shifting profit, you have companies that do invoicing and re-invoicing so as to shift the profit from one jurisdiction to the other, and or to and those acts. That is why I thought this bill was addressed. It's sort of complete the legislative regime as it relates to that piece of legislation, and so I wasn't too concerned about it. And I said, well, this is perhaps keeping with the government's commitment to ensure that our legislative regime is conforming with all of the international arrangements that they are required to do. And so we have no, and I still have no objection to it. But what you have done is, at a time when we are concerned about issues that's in the public domain, I pulled up because I read it and I had to read it just now when I heard Carmichael speak to some of the provisions of the bill. And I'll just look at it again. The bill deals with the intent to defraud a foreign government. And specifically, it addresses a foreign government as it relates to the collection of money for the purposes of the general revenue of that government. Again, that ties to what I call the BEPS principle, profit share. And then I almost could call this the Peter Pan question.
Honorable members, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
I stand on the point of order. The Deputy Prime Minister cannot stand on this. I stand on the point of order. That is totally unbecoming. Speaker, no member of this House, in accordance with the rules, ought to have made a statement like that about another member. No member. We're not going to put the Deputy Prime Minister in a position where he's going to be the one to start. The member from Cat Island ought to have, you ought to have the decency, you ought to have the...
Honorable members.
No, sir. You ought to, if you don't have the decency to withdraw that, Mr. Speaker, that must be struck. That is unacceptable. We cannot make aspersions about the character, conduct of members of this parliament. We know that. And it is deliberate. It is deliberate. The rules specifically prohibit it, and the member for Cat Island never should have done it. It was deliberate. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you to strike it, and I'm asking the member of Cat Island if he has any decency.
Honorable member, resume your seat. Honorable member, resume your seat. Honorable member for Cat Island. Honorable member for Cat Island, resume your seat. Honorable member. Honorable members. Honorable members, this is the ruling of the chair on that matter. I agree with the member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador in what he said with respect to the opposition having its say and the government having its way. But my honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador, the rules prohibit certain comments, even with respect to the opportunity for you to have your say. You just cannot say anything. And with respect to the statement that you made, it was, in my estimation, grossly inappropriate, and it appeared to be deliberately, politically mischievous. And not only that, this matter is a matter that is before the court, is under the sub judice rule, and no member in this parliament should seek to impugn the integrity and credibility of another member in such a way. So in the circumstances, the statement made by the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador is hereby expunged from the records. And further, honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador, this matter is before the courts, and the chair will not tolerate any statements that could have the effect, the state honorable members, the chair will not tolerate any statement that could have the effect of prejudicing the matter that is before the court or impugning the reputation of any other member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Speaker, as I indicated, right, I do the statement that I made, right, and hence the continuing conversation on the subject matter falls to be considered in the same way you have opined about what I am doing. That is for political purposes. So I say the same thing about your ruling.
Honorable member.
And I move on.
Honorable member.
Speak.
For Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Why was it
Honorable member, resume your seat for a moment. On the statement made by the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador with respect to the ruling of the chair, that also is most inappropriate and is hereby expunged from the records. The honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador. You may proceed.
Speaker, all I'm saying is that this bill speaks to persons directly or indirectly causing or delivering to cause information that relates to the collection of money. So that will cover circumstances where, for example, persons or companies are invoicing between themselves, like I tied it to the BEPS provision, and the bill is here. And I said why I came to that. See, I am tying it to things that we have done in this house before. And I'm just pointing out, that this will cover circumstances where persons are complicit in causing invoices to reflect certain information when that information may not be true. And there are facts about that out there. And you might be able to shut me here, but I'll be able to say it somewhere else. There are facts about that out there.
Honorable member,
And
if you recognize the honorable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
Speak on I rise on the point of order.
Carmichael on a point of order.
Speaker, my point of order. The member for Cat Island is again misleading this honorable House. There are a number of elements that must be satisfied in any of these provisions. He sought to mention one possible element. He has not mentioned the fact that it has to relate to someone who is employed in the service of a government, or it relates to the collection of money for the purpose of the general revenue of that government of a foreign country. And so he sought to twist it for his own purposes, and that's very deliberate. Cat Island is a very smart man. He knows exactly what he's doing. But Cat Island is wrong to do it. It's wrong.
if we adhere to the Westminster system, all its conventions, right, that is more binding than what is written, right, and all of us in here would consider that, we perhaps will not be, they will not be as seemingly protective on the face of it. And I say seemingly protective on the face of it, of whomever they want fish to protect. Because the exposure is already there. And I'm certain that the person who they think they might be protecting is looking through that protection and saying nothing but...
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael on a
Speaker, I'm
point
asking
of order.
the honorable member for Cat Island to withdraw that. I'm not seeking to protect anybody. I'm standing here to protect the rules of this parliament, which requires us to do certain things. And we are honorable men and women in this place. And there's a reason why we have those rules. I'm not here to protect. Speaker, I'm not finished. I'm not finished, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I'm not finished.
And the point of order relating to what?
Honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke in San Salvador. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Honorable members, let me make this clear. If a member rises on a point of order and he states his point of order, it is for the chair to make a determination whether the point was well taken or not well taken. Not for any other member to get to his feet and try to suggest or to put in the public domain some other idea.
Speaker, the
Now,
orders that the member has presumed openly that I am seeking to protect someone. That's what he said. There's no such intention to protect anybody. I asked him to withdraw that. That's all.
I said seemingly, but I use the word seemingly, but if the member say he's not seeking to protect anybody, but he's seeking to protect what he calls the rules of the House, I just asked him that what rule have I specifically breached in bringing out, because I go back to the point of what he raised. I was saying that this amendment that creates a new offense, right? That creates a new offense will seemingly capture circumstances or facts that relate to re-invoicing. And I also go further and say it is tied to bills that we passed earlier, to what they call to set aside the BEPS principle. where companies shift properties, shift profits between jurisdictions to save tax. And I'm saying that's all I'm saying that it does.
Honorable member,
Yeah.
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
I'd like that. Since I have a copy of one of the rules, I don't know which one this is. But Rule 33, Mr. Speaker, manner and content of speeches. And 17. 17. Yeah, I want to touch on 17 first, because imputations, it says that you should not make imputations of improper motives, personal reflections of members, and they have to be dealt with by the chair under the rules. And you have made the speaker, the member has made an imputation of an improper motive by me. Me, you're me. A man with a pure, I have a speaker, I have a pure heart.
Honorable member, let me hear the member for Carmichael.
Huh? So you apologize to me? Apologize. Speaker, the other thing is that members shall not use offensive, abusive, or insulting words about a member of parliament. Okay. So you asked me the rules, the speaker.
Has drawn attention to rules to which you yourself already ruled upon, which I have accepted, right? We have accepted. And so what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, all I was attempting to demonstrate is the kind of activities. One thing you must look at when you look at the bill itself, it speaks about action or omissions. It really should be act or omissions, right? But I am so I'm looking at the acts and omissions that are captured by this new offense. Right? That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. And the member quite rightly pointed out that I only dealt with one aspect of the many others that it could cover. But that's the one I wanted to highlight. That's what I wish to highlight. And so we don't have any objection to this bill, right? But I just thought that it was curious at a time like this, and it seemed to be rather it's very convenient for us to be dealing with it at this time. And there's a lot of information out there, and I've decided where I say that information. Right? I'd like to do it here so persons have the opportunity to respond. Right? No. I can do it out there. No, I can do it out there. No, I know. Yeah, I know. I know what I could do, and I know I could do it too. Right? I know I could do it too. But if we are adhering to the Westminster system, I know every now and then when it suits us, we embrace that. Right? We embrace it. And when they sue us, when they don't suit us, not just looking around to see who might have been impacted by that, And then, but when it doesn't, that's a lot, right? And so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Yeah, so Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
We're not going to be distracted. We're not going to be distracted.
Honorable member, Golden Gates, you are on your feet. Are you?
Speaker.
On a point of order? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Cat Island just made a reference to the Westminster system, and I do not see the relevance to this bill. I'm rising on the point of order of relevance, and I see no relevance, Mr. Speaker, to the Westminster system regarding the bill before this House, sir. I see absolutely none. And while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, a second order, imputation, number 17, Mr.
Honorable
Speaker.
member, you have another point
Yes,
of order?
sir. Yes, sir. I have 2 points of order.
State the second point.
one. Yes, sir. It's Rule 3317, imputations of improper motives and personal reflections of members, and shall be dealt by the chair. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador just said, and I quote, sir, it is very convenient for us to be dealing with this matter at this time. Close quote. Those are his words. That's an imputation clearly of improper motive, Mr. Speaker. We are dealing with it for the reason we're dealing with it, as we have said. There's no other reason we're dealing with it. He said it is convenient that we are dealing with it at this time. No, we're dealing for the reason, as has been said, by the move of this bill and by the second of this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable
Thank you, sir.
members.
You run on those, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable members, the bill that is before this House, according to our action sheet, was laid on the 18th of November 2020. And today is the 25th. It's 1 week later.
Yeah.
So the House hasn't met in between that time. So I think this is the first opportunity that the House has had to deal with this bill since it was late. So I don't think that should be an issue.
I didn't make an issue. I didn't make any issue about when the bill was laid and when we were about to debate it. In fact, we only found out
Honorable member,
when we could debate it.
I'm only suggesting to you that you are indicating and putting in the public domain that it is interesting that it is being dealt with at this time.
Yeah, that's,
Well, it couldn't have been dealt with at any other time. That's the point I'm making.
yeah, but how is that?
This bill was laid on the 18th,
Yeah, but
and we are the 25th. The House hasn't met since the 18th.
yes, Mr. Speaker.
This is the only time since this bill was laid
But Speaker,
for it to be dealt with.
yeah, but Mr. Speaker, but Speaker, how is that a matter before you? If I call this an interesting time for us to debate it, how does it become a matter for you to tell me that this is the only time? I can hear them saying it.
No, you can hear me. You can hear the chair saying it. You can hear the chair saying it if you breach Rule 3317
How?
by imputing improper motive by suggesting that it is.
And whose part? Against whom have I imputed improper motion? All I said is it is interesting that we are debating at this time. That's my view, my opinion. Interesting that we are debating at this time a bill that speaks to persons defrauding a foreign government, which include tax evasion. That's what I said, Mr. Speaker. So that's what I'm saying. But if I say that, Mr. Speaker, all I'm saying, suggesting, Mr. Speaker, if I say something, why would the speaker take issue with
Honorable
without
member,
the other side?
honorable member,
This is between us.
the speaker is not taking issue. The speaker is not taking issue on his own initiative. The honorable member for Golden Gates raised the issue on a point of order. I'm simply responding to the issue raised by the member for Golden Gates with respect to the statement that you made and pointing out the fact that we've only had 1 week since this bill was laid, and today is the first opportunity for it to have been dealt with. That's the point I'm making simply. So it is improper to impute any other motive other than the fact that this is the first opportunity.
Yeah. See, well, perhaps you might think it. You might ask yourself, then, Mr. Speaker, we have had bills
Honorable member,
made from the 18th
Honorable
of
member.
October. All right, several bills from the 18th of October. We've had bills from the 21st of 2018, 2019. We are not debating them. That's why I find it interesting.
honorable member, I understand what you're doing, but my position hasn't changed.
No, no,
We are not dealing with any bills laid in 2018.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to persuade you to change your position.
Well, don't challenge it because there is provision in the rule for you to challenge the speaker's ruling.
I am not challenging it, Mr. Speaker. I am just telling you why I believe what I believe, and I'm not trying to persuade you one way or the other. And I speak into the people out there. That's what I'm doing, right? That's what I'm doing, Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Cat Island, you may proceed. Honorable members, the member for Cat Island has the floor.
So, Mr. Speaker, we see this bill. We understand all of the acts and omissions that this bill covers. And we also note that this is perhaps, even though it was not said by the government, ties into what I call the BEPS principles. And perhaps that might have been one of the things that they would have addressed while speaking to this, which they didn't. And that's why I had to think the way I did. And it will be addressed again. The Speaker, we do not object to the bill, the creation of this new offense. It is timely and appropriate at this time.
Thank you, honorable member. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
Oh, thank you, Speaker. I didn't, you done first? I just say, I mean, we have a role on this side too.
The chair recognizes.
It was like the manner of the way I was saying it, like, Gordon.
Oh, no, we don't have to get carried away on the side. We want to give you the opportunity, I understand. It is now time for us to go and sup outside.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, we are at the luncheon hour, and so, Mr. Speaker, as it is customary in this house, we will be taking our luncheon break. And so I do move that the House suspends until 3:30 p.m. today. The Senate is going to be meeting at 3 o'clock. And so we will be back at that time. The luncheon break is customary. Thank you.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend until 3:30 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3:30 p.m. this afternoon.